Okay, so it turns out that skills may not be the proper abstraction to provide additional context to your agent. Now, skills were introduced by Anthropic with this progressive disclosure capability, where you progressively add to the context of your agent in order to use a certain package or follow certain instructions. By design, it's very simple and elegant, but seems like agents usually completely ignores them, which kind of beats the purpose of skills. This came out in a Vercel's blog post where they showed that agents.md outperforms skills in their evals. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about what exactly does this mean and why this is happening and how you can mitigate this if you're building skills for agents. Okay, so the idea of skills came after the introduction of the MCPs. The biggest problem with MCPs is that when you load tools through an MCP server, it loads all the definition of the tools into the context window. So you have a lot of irrelevant information in the context window of your model, even before sending a single message. Skills, on the other hand, does progressive disclosure. Initially, the agent has access to different skills, their description, and when it decides to use a skill, it is going to get more information based on its needs. Now, the problem is that the agent has to call the skill or invoke it before using it. Now, in this research, Vercel is showing that even if a skill is available to an agent, it is usually not invoked at all. In fact, in the 56% situations in their evals, the agent completely ignored invoking a specific skill even though it was available. And that's not what you want your agent to be doing. So let's look at the actual application that they were trying to solve. So they introduced a new version of next.js. This is version 16, which has updates to the previous version. Skills are extremely useful for these situations because if you update something or you have two conflicting documentation for two libraries, you can just put them in skills and tell the agent to use a specific skill when needed. Now, this is the perfect situation to use a skill because it provides separation of concern, and also you're not stuffing your context window. Since the documentation is available to the agent, it should be able to read it when needed. Now, the biggest problem was that the agent was not triggering or invoking the skills. Why does this happen? Well, although almost every frontier lab is adopting skills, most of these models are not trained to actually use these. It's a completely different abstraction compared to tool usage or function calling. I think Anthropic has done some reinforcement learning on using agent skills, but I don't think this post-processing has been done on other frontier models like Gemini 3 or GPT-5.2. For something like skill, you need a lot more training for it to be used reliably. A good example of post-training is something like Agent Swarm from Kimi with the Kimi 2.5 release. Now, in their case, they had to do something called parallel agent reinforcement learning for the main orchestrator to spin up to 100 different sub-agents. So even though multiple different companies are adopting this standard, I don't think they are investing enough yet for it to be reliably used. Now, there was another interesting finding. Not only adding skills did not improve the performance on that specific eval set, but it actually performed worse in certain situations compared to the baseline, which is very interesting. Okay, so what exactly did work in their situation? So the simplest approach of stuffing everything in a agent.md seems to be working better compared to using skills with progressive disclosure. They also tried two different approaches. One was to index the information and put some references in the agents.md, and the other one was to stuff everything in agents.md. Think of agents.md as the grounding document that your agent can use. Almost all the companies supported except Anthropic, they are still sticking to Claude.md, but think of this as Claude.md for Codex, Gemini, Antigravity, and all the other coding agents. Now, there was one other interesting finding as well, and that is how you invoke your skills. By default, you don't really have control on when the agent is going to use skills. It's up to the agent, but the way you instruct the agent to use skill also matters a lot. Telling the agent explicitly to use skill does seem to invoke it more often, but it's really dependent on the prompt that you're using. So if you want to use skills with your agents, you'll have to experiment a lot with your prompt engineering. What exactly worked in their case? The simplest approach of stuffing the skill information into agents.md seems to give you the best results. Keep in mind, if you're using a large number of different skills, you can't just stuff them into agents.md or cloud.md, because again, you're going to be running into the context rot issue. So in their case, initially, the skills context was about 40 kilobytes, and they were able to compress it down to 8 kilobytes by summarizing it, and it still seems to work. Okay, so what does this mean if you are building your own agentic systems that you want to utilize skills? The first thing is to see which model you're using. If you're using something like Opus 4.5, it might be able to use your skills because it probably is post-trained with some RL. Ideally, I would still put this in agents.md or cloud.md with some indexing. It will be a summarized version of what type of skills are available, and then it points to a specific tool where it can use those documentation or retrieve them. That's a pattern that Vercel recommends as well. Do let me know what your experience with skill has been. Have you noticed any of these issues? If so, please put them in the comment section below. And if you have found any solution, please share that with the community as well. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. And as always, see you in the next one.